Should Cooper be suspended?
Well, the immediate answer to that is absolutely, Skip Cassidy. He should be suspended. But I say that only because we're talking about an NFL with a commissioner in Roger Goodell that has made an example of several individuals who have transgressed under his stewardship as the commissioner of the NFL. If you impugn the integrity of the National Football League in any way, you don't need a court of law to convict you. Roger Goodell will do that himself and hand down punishment. And so we've seen people, whether it's DUIs, whether it's accusations of misbehaving or whatever the case may be, anything that falls under the guise of impugning the integrity of the National Football League because you're associated with them and you've brought negative publicity in their direction, you're going to be punished. The Philadelphia Eagles fined Riley Cooper. I'm not surprised there. I've worked in Philadelphia for 16 years as a reporter and a columnist, as you know, Skip. And I know that Jeffrey Lurie is a first-class individual and the organization is first class. Even if Riley Cooper wasn't so inclined to be apologetic on his own, trust me, the Philadelphia Eagles were going to address that with the level of fervor it deserves. So I'm not surprised there, and I do expect that Roger Goodell may suspend him. But let me say a couple of other things, Skip, if you don't mind me adding this. Number one, I accept Riley Cooper's apology. I think that he exhibited a strong level of contrition. He was apologetic. What more can you do from that level? He talked about his parents, how he wasn't raised that way. He talked about how disgusting of a word it was, how embarrassed he was to find himself in this situation. Watching him, I accept his apology on face value. That's number one. Number two, I applaud Michael Vick in saying what he said because as a leader of the Philadelphia Eagles, as a teammate, and as an individual who has clearly made his own mistakes in his past, he's sensitive to the fact that somebody can really, really screw up and they may need some support. And he also said that he spoke to Riley Cooper man to man about that. I also applaud Jason Avant and what he said because he talked about how this is not something that can easily be swept under the rug. And he's absolutely right because Riley Cooper, a lot of his teammates are brothers, and he's going to have to deal with the brothers for a long time to come because the manner and the ease with which he said what he said and the way it seemed to so easily ooze out of his mouth is something that is going to resonate with dudes in that locker room. Make no mistake about it. I think I heard Hugh Douglas allude to that yesterday, and he's absolutely on the money. So I want to sit there and acknowledge Jason Avant and Michael Vick's words. But having said all of that, my focus, me, Stephen A. Smith, is this. We also have to look within our own community. You know, the reality of the situation is that, if there's a black person that tells you they never use that word, I'm going to call them a flaming hypocrite. Amongst ourselves, at some point in time or another, we've used that word. But at the same time, in the world of professional sports, you walk into a clubhouse, Skip, you walk into a locker room, you not only hear the music blaring, but you see the way dudes communicate with one another with such ease, with white folks standing right around them, including reporters. And so at some point in time, we have to ask ourselves, despite the obvious historical context, despite that being the obvious point, is it just as simple as that? As somebody spewing a racial epithet or using that word? Or do we have something to do with it in terms of the ease with which and the comfort with which other people feel they can use it because of our use of the word? And by us, I say us, meaning myself included. I'm not talking about other black people. Yep. I'm talking about me too. It's something that, as you've said many times in the past, Skip, should be completely omitted and eradicated from our language altogether, and you're absolutely right.
You covered a lot of ground there, my friend. To your last point, that's a very separate issue, a black man using that word to a black man, than what I'm about to talk about.
Yes, it is.
Let's keep it right here for this moment. That's an issue you can address that I cannot address, Stephen A. I don't know what that feels like, but I do know this issue. And to me, this is strictly my personal opinion. I would have cut Riley Cooper on the spot yesterday. As you just pointed out, I have said many times on the show over many years on this show, that word that he used is the ugliest, most vile, despicable, unconscionable word in the English language. And when it comes out of a white man's mouth, he has crossed a line over which you cannot return. So in this case, Stephen A., you've crossed a line, especially that you can't cross back when you are the member of a pro football team, as you pointed out, on which more than half the players in that locker room are African Americans. And I realize he apologized, and I realize that you took it as a sincere apology. I don't think you can apologize as a white man for using that word, because you have, to me, shown your, so to speak, true colors. You have declared yourself. And I know some people were saying last night, well, he had been drinking. Okay, maybe that was truth serum. Well, he was at a Kenny Chesney country western concert. Well, he was in a comfort zone, even though he had an altercation with a, as he said, a black security guard. He felt very comfortable around his people to let that word spill out of his mouth. Maybe before cell phone video, he could have gotten away with it, but he did not get away with this one this time, Stephen A. And to me, I'm sure that Michael Vick, Jason Avant, D'Amico Ryans, all that we saw on camera on SportsCenter saying he's a good dude, we've known him for these years, and we like him, and we accept his apology. I get that. But deep down, I think you will agree with me, Stephen A., all the black players in that locker room have to be a little uneasy going forward with Riley Cooper in that locker room. So I'm going to say, for the sake of team unity and team chemistry, that the three primary decision makers on the Philadelphia Eagles, the owner, the GM, the coach, all three of whom are white, should have gotten together yesterday and said, we have to clear this air. No matter that we have lost Jeremy Maclin, and all of a sudden Riley Cooper is a little more valuable than he was a couple days ago, no matter that, it will be more valuable for the sake of our locker room to dismiss him from this team. Because to me, to discuss his suspension is almost insignificant. It pales in comparison to what this issue is and the line that he crossed. I'm sorry, Stephen A. I would have said, you are gone. Whether you apologize for 5 days in a row, you are gone, and we will be better off without that in our locker room. That's my personal opinion.
Well, I respect your opinion. I respectfully disagree, number one, because I think that in America it's the land of second chances. I think, number two, there always needs to be some degree of compassion. People make mistakes. Now, you may say that this wasn't a mistake, that it oozed out of his mouth naturally. Skip, I agree with that. It might be something that's in his heart. Clearly, the ease and the comfort with which he said it, came across as if it's in his heart. But you also have to respect the fact, as I'm sure you do, that as a black man, I don't need somebody to either spew the N-word or refrain from doing so to get this feeling about what's in your heart on a day-to-day basis when I'm walking around certain people, working in the workplace with them, communicating with them, seeing some of the practices, some of the things they joke about, some of the things that they say. And so as a result of that, as a black man, I refuse, as much as I abhor the use of that word by somebody outside of the African-American community. Let me be very, very clear about this. Even though we sit there and we need to completely eradicate it from our language, there is no doubt about it. And I don't want to hear arguments about the difference between the word ending with an ER as opposed to an A and all of that nonsense. I don't want to hear that. I understand in some people's eyes it's a different connotation, but it's a different conversation for another day because it's too deep. But in the end, despite the fact that I recognize that the word needs to be completely eradicated and omitted from our vocabulary, myself included, all right? Let me also be very, very clear to America. Black folks talking amongst ourselves and using the word is entirely different than somebody outside of our community spewing it in our direction. I don't have to explain it to anybody. Get over it. That's the way it is, okay? But with all of that being said, let's understand something here. When you sit there and you have to deal with the trials and tribulations that you deal with in everyday life, I'm not going to be prisoner to the word to that point. And what I mean by that is that you've got people, they'll get all emotional, they'll get in an uproar, they want to respond and reciprocate and act in a hostile fashion because this word was spewed in their direction. It's unfortunate, it's insensitive, it's incendiary, it's all of those different things. But it ain't affecting my day-to-day life in terms of what I'm going to do when I get up to go to work my butt off, to maintain or elevate my quality of life. We can't allow ourselves to be a prisoner to this word to such a degree that we are willing to overreact to it in such a negative way that it brings an excessive amount of attention to a matter. Riley Cooper was wrong. He made a mistake. He's got to deal with the brothers inside that Eagles locker room. Make no mistake about it. But I also think it's incumbent upon those very players inside that locker room and beyond to think about the music that they play, the lyrics that they play in front of white folks, the way they communicate with one another, the language that they use, especially as it pertains to that word, right in front of dudes, and how instead of just leaning on history and the racial connotations associated with it, maybe, just maybe, sometimes that stuff gets spewed out of somebody else's mouth because of the comfort we've assisted in giving somebody else because we use it so freely in front of other people. That's something that I think needs to be said. That doesn't let Riley Cooper off the hook, Skip. I get your point. Doesn't let him off the hook in any fashion, but it's important that that is said.